Hey everyone, it's Yasarian, and welcome to another edition of my TimeSplitters 2 modding tutorial. This section is not going to focus on HXD or hex editing or anything like that. Instead, we're going to talk all about texture modding, making the characters and weapons and items or even levels of TimeSplitters 2 look different by changing the way their textures look. And to do this, we're going to need some different tools than the usual stuff. Main thing we're going to need is an image editing software, one that allows you to work with transparency. So regular paint won't do the trick, the regular image editing software, because that tends to make transparent areas just flat out white or black or something like that. The two best image editing softwares that come to mind for me are Paint.net or GIMP. Either work. I just prefer Paint.net. I find it easier to use. So, to get started, you're going to need to download this program. Just go onto the website, www.getpaint.net, go to the download section, and select Get it on Windows 10, if you're using it on Windows. And then from there, just install it, get it up and running, and that will get you ready for the editing parts. Next thing we're going to need to do is learn how to extract the textures from TimeSplitters 2, which I'll go into detail on how you do it. Dolphin makes it very easy to do this. So, once you have Dolphin up, you're going to want to go to Options, go to Graphics Settings, and then go over to Advanced. This is what you're going to need to use, the Dump Textures option. You don't want to activate this right away though, because otherwise you'll be getting a ton of textures that you don't really need. The best thing you can do is, when you click on this, it'll automatically extract any texture that's loaded into a specific folder in the Dolphin folder of My Documents. It's labeled as dump and has this listing as GTSE4F. What I found the best thing you can do is create a small mapmaker map, preferably in the virtual tile set. Place down one spawn and one weapon spawn if you're modding a weapon. And then as you load it in Mapmaker Preview, select the Dump Textures option. That way you'll only get what you need instead of instead of having tons of weapons and characters and other environments you don't need. Some of the virtual tile set stuff will be loaded as well, but you should be able to easily sort through that, because the virtual tile set's really distinct with its blue coloring and all that. So now that we've got that down, let's go ahead and extract some textures. We're going to start with a good weapon to work with, a distinct one, the Plasma Auto Rifle. You go to Preview Map, and you're going to want to click on Mapmaker Preview. And while it's loading, Alt-Tab out of the game, go to Dolphin Emulator, the menu, and activate Dump Textures. Thankfully it takes a little bit to load, so you can usually do it within this span of time. Something important to note is, once this is loaded up, that weapons in TimeSplitters 2 usually have about 3 models. The two we'll be focusing on, the ones that show up, are first person and third person. Third person ones have less detail, and they only have one texture, just for the weapon overall. First person ones have more detail, and the textures are broken up into bigger pieces, so there are multiple ones to edit. So when you're going to extract them, it's important to look at the weapon in third person, and then pick it up, so that way you'll have all the textures you need. So once you're done with that, you can pull Alt-Tab into Dolphin 5.0 again, go to Options, Graphics Settings, Advanced, and then disable Dump Textures. Because if you keep it on, then it'll start dumping everything from the font to different stuff in the Mapmaker view. It's just a mess. You don't want to clog this up with the textures you don't need. When you get into the My Documents folder, go to Dolphin Emulator, Dump, Textures, then GTSE4F. And you'll find that some of the virtual tile set stuff was loaded with it, along with the main menu icons, like the overheat meter and ammo counter, along with the font size. but you should be able to pick out the stuff for the plasma auto rifle pretty quickly. There are several textures that we can take advantage of for it. The ones that are going to be most prominent are the tan ones. These are the main outer body of the weapon, and the blackish, grayish ones are for the interior metal parts. There's also just a third-person one that is applied to the entire model when seeing it for pickup. So you're going to want to copy them, put them in their own folder so you know how to distinguish them, and then you can edit them in Paint.net. Something to note is that these tan parts belong only to the plasma auto rifle, but sometimes the stuff for like the grayish, blackish textures, metallic ones, sometimes they're shared among weapons. It's tough to predict which weapons carry which textures. So to simplify things, we're not going to change those. We're only going to change the tan textures. We're going to make the plasma auto rifle look more like the assault rifle from the original TimeSplitters 2 footage, where it used to have like a futuristic version of the FAMAS as a weapon. So here are all the textures organized and placed into their own folder. What we're now going to do is pull up the third-person one and the two tan textures in Paint.net. I want to also note that the textures usually are divided up into 4 smaller pieces. They're all the same each way, but the smaller ones are for optimization for when the weapon is further away and the game can get away with loading lower quality textures to save memory. You should probably edit those too, that way your gun doesn't suddenly change colors when you're further away from it. It's pretty easy though, you just resize it in half each time there's a new image. So the first one is 128 by 64, the next one would be 64 by 32, then 32 by 16, and then finally 16 by 8. Not all textures have this. You might find this when editing level textures, but most of them go by that usual formula. Now that we're in Paint.net, we've got all the textures we need. Now, it may seem intimidating at first to edit these because they do have a lot of detail despite being smaller textures. You're going to want to focus on editing the big ones though, and then resizing them as needed to fit into the lower quality ones. I found that the quickest way to go about editing them is by using the adjustments option and changing hue/saturation. This allows you to change the color levels for each item. Like, you can change it so that it's like a purple color or green, any of the color spectrum. You can also fine-tune the brightness of it, or the darkness, or the color saturation, which shows just how much color it has, either too much or none. So in this case, we're going to lower the color saturation. We're going to make the gun a little darker. We're also going to do this for the other texture, the other tan one that's used. Now, some textures can be tougher to modify. They don't change color as well. When that happens, I find that the best thing to do is to first apply the sepia option in adjustments, and then change the hue/saturation. That makes a big difference. Like, I know Big Tony's textures can be tough to change, but if you do that trick with it, it makes it so that pretty much any texture in the game can be given a good color makeover. Okay, so we've changed the first two ones. From there, it'd be easy to just shrink them down with the go to image, resize, then you change the width to 64, the height to 32. You apply that, and then you would copy to the next image. Or you could just apply the same adjustment to the smaller image, whichever works better. I find that resizing and copying is better for more complex changes, and applying the adjustments again is better for simpler changes. Now the weapon, the third-person weapon texture is going to be trickier because we're going to be changing the entire thing. We don't want to make the entire thing just darker, because that wouldn't reflect how the gun will look. So we're going to need to select the textures we want to change with this tool, with the rectangle select. We're going to cover all of the tan parts and then apply the adjustment accordingly. Something else to note is that it doesn't matter if you highlight the black sections of the third-person texture. It doesn't make a difference if you change that, from what I've found. Alright, gun's looking good. We changed the third person texture accordingly. Let's change the smaller textures as well. Just give them the same hue saturation treatment. We can just automatically apply it to the next one because it saves the previous change. We haven't exited out of the program. For the third person model, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to save it, or if you prefer, we can save a copy of it, so that way you don't, if you need the texture for another project, you won't have to go back and edit it again. But in this case, I already have a backup, so we're just going to save it as it is. Plus, you're going to want to keep the same texture name, unless you're replacing another texture for another item, that is. So just go through all these, save them. Then when it comes time for the third person one, we'll resize it and apply it to each smaller one. Just copy and paste it in, and save that. Don't save the previous one. You don't want to resize the original image, and save it that way. That should take care of everything. Now, if you want to put these in game, what you're going to want to do is copy these textures, go into Documents, Dolphin Emulator, Load, Textures, GTSE4F, and then paste it in there. You can paste it as a folder, or you can just paste all the textures by themselves. And to enable them, you go into Dolphin, you go into Options, go into Graphical Settings, and then you hit Load Custom Textures. Alright, everything's looking good. So that takes care of weapon modding. Character modding can be more complex because characters have several sets of textures, not just two. Sometimes it depends on what modes they're in. Characters like Sergio would just have textures for the menu and arcade mode, but characters like Sergeant Cortez would have textures for story mode, the menu, arcade mode, and cutscenes. And if you want your changes to be visible in all of them, you have to change all sets accordingly. Usually you can just copy the changes over to the other textures because they're usually identical. Sometimes there are minor differences. It it depends on the character. It's a case-by-case thing. Now, you would extract them through the same way. Whenever they would show up, you would have the dump textures option enabled. But that can be tricky. You can pull a lot of textures you don't want or need in doing so. So to simplify things, what you can do is do a bit of a workaround. Look up Exavengar, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Look up his HD texture mod, and you're going to download it. The HD mod is a great mod in of itself. I totally recommend using it, but something really good about it is the fact that for a lot of the characters, the original textures are included. They're included in this section called Corel Auto Preserve. And that goes for the menu icons and those textures for the main menu, the cutscenes, everything about a character. You can find the original textures for them in the Corel Auto Preserve folders. That is a quicker way to get around to editing them, if you'd prefer to do it that way. If you want to just do it more straightforward, you could also just extract them from the game themselves. But that's an option if you want to give it a shot. Just download the mod from ModDB and do the rest from there. If you're going to do this, though, I would strongly recommend that you credit Exavengar for his fantastic work on the mod and for organizing all the textures. Since he did the work, it's only fair that you should mention that he organized them and give credit where it's due. I just think that he's a fantastic texture modder and deserves a lot of credit for making the first breakthroughs in modding the game. So that should cover just about everything. I want to also note that the HD mod, the original textures, it does not include the gun textures, most of them, or the textures for characters like the Neo Tokyo civilians. You'll have to get those yourself. And that can be a little tricky, but especially because they share textures, but it can still be fun to mod them as well. So that's about everything then. Thank you so much for watching this series. I hope that it was helpful to you all. Hope that you all got something out of it, and that if you are interested in modding TimeSplitters 2, this provides some good insight on how to do it. I don't have any current plans to make more episodes of this series, but if more discoveries are made that I think could use explaining, I might do it. I mean, people keep finding new things about the game that are just fascinating. The modding document by Dude 3500 is always being updated with new and cool things. Recently he added an option to enable boss characters to have high health in Map Maker, just like they would in story mode. So people are always learning how to do new things and refine things and how to make modding more accessible. I know Fixions made a editor program to make it easier to edit weapons and damage and everything like that, and I totally recommend checking that out if you get the chance. So, once again, thanks for tuning in. Hope you got something out of this, and I hope to see more people get into TimeSplitters 2 modding. I think there's a lot of potential for it, and since we don't have a fourth game yet and Rewind isn't out yet, this will be a good way to pass the time, to create some cool projects in the second game, to make it any way we'd want to. So, have a great day, and thanks again.